Chapter 3. The new knock was on. Chuckles grinned as he walked down the aisle of blade cabinets and storage arrays. Green LED lights shined from each slot. The hum of the fans was barely audible through the noise-canceling headphones. Chuckles finished his walk of the aisles and returned to the knock entrance. He closed the inner door, placed the hearing protection back in its cradle, and opened the outer door. He started to walk forward and then stopped. Marie stood a few feet away, an awkward smile on her face. Hello, Chuckles said. She blushed. Hi. His brows scrunched together. Can I, help you? She wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead. We're running the analysis for PPE. He waited for her to say more, but she didn't. Okay, Chuckles said. She didn't look well. Her cheeks were flushed, but her skin was paler than usual. Is there a problem? Yes, Marie said and smiled. We want to use the new molecular modeling programs. For a second, Chuckles wanted to say no. He wanted to make comments about how the knock hadn't yet been battle-tested, that he didn't know how it would perform. But that was bullshit. Chuckles had smashed the systems with several genetic analysis runs. The processors were burned in, memory tested, and all power supplies in the green. Plus, the new knock was damned cold. In other words, there would never be a better time. A lopsided grin appeared on his face. We can make that happen, he said. You guys give me an hour or two and I'll have it ready. Marie nodded. Thank you, Stephen. You feeling okay? He asked. I think so. Probably got a cold or something. Chuckles reached and touched her forehead with the back of his hand. Her flesh felt warm and clammy. I think you need to take a break. Get some drugs and maybe a nap. She shook her head. Not on a hot shot. Sleep when you're dead and all that. Let's hope not. He put his hands on his hips. What happened? What? She followed his gaze to her bandaged hand. Oh, that. I cut myself opening the PPE barrel. Stupid mistake. Chuckles frowned. Any chance you got something on you? Like, what is that shit? Fracking fluid? She giggled. No fracking fluid. Not in offshore exploration, anyway. He rolled his eyes. You know what I mean. Something that ain't oil? Don't know, she said. I washed it in the emergency chem shower and covered it with iodine. And it's not like crude oil has a ton of bacteria or viruses. Chuckles grunted. You better go take something. That cold is creeping into your chest. Marie nodded. Okay, Stephen, I'll do that. Good, he said. I'd hate it if you got sick. Really? Marie's smile widened. Chuckles' expression returned to a thin line. Yeah. I'd like to, take you out sometime. For drinks or something. Marie blushed and looked away. Sorry, Chuckles said and stared at his feet. Guess that was too... No, Marie said. I would like that. He raised his eyes, cheeks hot with embarrassment. Chuckles shifted on his feet. I have to get back to making sure the knock is ready for you. Right. She stepped away from him. And I have to get back to the lab. When's your next break? He asked. 2 a.m.? Why? A smile tugged at his lips. Just wondering when I'd see you again. Marie opened her mouth to say something and then stopped. She swallowed hard. See you then? Hopefully, he said. She turned and walked back to the sky bridge. He watched her head down the hallway, eyes straying to her perfect ass. Beautiful, smart, and not afraid of geeks, he sighed. And way above my station. Chuckles shook his head and walked to the stairwell. As he took the stairs down to the loading dock, he couldn't get her out of his mind. A cigarette or two and he'd be level again. Just talking to her had been a chore. He'd no idea what he'd say at break. He'd no idea he wouldn't get the chance. As she walked to the sky bridge, Marie stared upward at the exposed ductwork. The construction company still hadn't connected most of the ventilation for the second floor. The lights weren't all on either. Like the rest of the scientists at the company, she wondered if the damned building would ever be finished. A sudden wave of fire hit her lungs. Marie doubled over, explosive coughs racking her body. Tears squeezed from her eyes. Lightning bolts of pain shot through her skull. She lurched and placed one hand on the nearest wall to keep her upright as she gasped for air between each cough. Just when she was certain she'd suffocate, the fit abated. She spat a large wad of mucus to the concrete floor and wiped at her mouth. Marie didn't see the flecks of red in the yellow-green blob of mucus. She panted in the gloom. Sick. I'm sick. Marie slowly stood and then leaned against the wall. Eyes closed, breath slowing, she whimpered as a flush of heat spread over her skin. Beads of sweat oozed from her forehead. Marie opened her eyes. The sky bridge was no more than a few steps away. And in the break room? Drugs. A wave of vertigo hit her as she entered the sky bridge. She halted until it passed. A thin thread of mucus drizzled from her left nostril. She wiped it away and started walking again. The sky bridge portion in the older building was much brighter, as were the hallways. The normally soft blue-white fluorescence burned her eyes. Through squinted slits, she made her way to the break room. From inside Kate's office, she heard the sounds of music. Mave must be playing a game or jamming out. Marie smiled and then coughed again. Another jolt of pain spread through her lungs. She shook her head to clear starlight from her mind and entered the break room. The remnants of dinner had already been cleared and stuffed into the garbage cans. She'd no doubt Darren had done it. Whenever there were overnights, Mike and Darren took care of the food and making sure everything was as spotless as could be. The medicine cabinet hung on the wall near the refrigerator. An emergency eye wash station hung next to it. Marie opened the cabinet and sniffed back another snail trail of snot. Antihistamines, fever reducers, ibuprofen, bandages, antiseptic. She scooped up 4 anti-inflammatories and a blister pack of cold medicine. Between sips of bottled water, she managed to swallow all the pills. As soon as her throat allowed her, she shotgunned the rest of the cold water. That was all she could do. She couldn't leave Kate and Jay short-handed, not unless she was on her damn deathbed. Marie tossed the empty plastic bottle into the recycling bin and headed for the stairs to the lab level. Kate sat at the computer terminal. While she and Jay waited for Marie to get back, Kate decided it was time to enter some numbers. Not that there was much to enter. The API, water content, and sediment readings were beyond bizarre. PPE was never going to believe the results, and if the strange nature of the oil continued to play out, she wasn't sure Simpson would even accept the report. But first, they had to run distillation. The first cut would require them to heat the oil and then siphon off any gases present at different heights in the distillation tower. In a normal sample, any hexane, butane, or light hydrocarbons would evaporate from the crude and rise to the top of the tower. Heavier hydrocarbons would be captured by the trays set at different heights. Any heavy, nasty stuff would remain in the bottom of the tower. In a normal sample, she thought, with this shit, no telling what's going to come out. Kate entered text in the fields on the form. She put notations for their observations next to the absurd numbers. Absurd. Yes, that's the word. She looked up as Jay moved to the sample beaker sitting on the shelf. He was in profile, but she could still tell he was frowning at the Pyrex container. "What's up?" she called. He flinched and then turned to her. "The oil. It's still bubbling." "Still small bubbles?" She hit the save button on the report and stood from the workstation. Jay grunted. "Not exactly." She walked toward him with quick steps as Jay backed away from the sample. "What's wrong with it? I know it's strange, but why do you look like you've seen, The words died in her throat. Tendrils of dried oil clung to the sides of the beaker, but they no longer looked like liquid. Instead, the threads bore a strong resemblance to burned chocolate. In the beaker's center, the oil wasn't bubbling. It looked like it was boiling. "Let's throw this shit out," she said. "Yeah, maybe we left it on the heater too long?" "I don't care. It needs to go in the waste." Jay grabbed a long pair of stainless steel forceps, put them around the beaker, and squeezed. He lifted the container from the shelf and carefully stepped toward the waste trap. "If you do the honors," Jay said. His voice quivered with nervous tension. Kate moved to the bright red barrel inset into the floor. She pressed a handle on its side, and the lid swung upward. She stared down into the interior. The trap was still closed. "Okay, go ahead and pour it in." "If it'll pour," Jay said. He walked until the beaker was above the hole and twisted his hands. As the container tipped, the oil slid free of the Pyrex and streamed into the barrel. Jay kept twisting his hands, bending at the waist until the beaker was upside down. Remnants of the oil dripped at a slow pace. "Thufferin' thuckatash," Jay yelled. "Just go already." Droplets of his saliva flew out of his mouth, some landing in the barrel. "I think you got it all," Kate said. "Okay." Jay began tilting the beaker back up again. When it was once again upright, he nodded to Kate. She pressed a button and the lid slammed down atop the barrel. "Say goodbye to the sample, Jay." "Bye, sample," Jay said. Kate depressed the floor pedal with her foot. The trap opened and a vacuum pump whooshed. The apparatus was designed to suck any solids or liquids through the trap and into the waste container below. The container held up to 20 gallons of substance before it had to be emptied, but Hal rotated their traps between the day and night shifts. That ensured the chemists knew what had been placed in the barrel so they could avoid mixing volatile chemicals. "Now what do I do with this?" Jay gestured with the beaker. She rolled her eyes and pointed. "What do you think you do? Put it in the damned sink." Jay growled in his throat and followed orders. The door at the front of the lab beeped twice. Kate turned and watched Marie step through the door. "And did you find Chuckles?" "Stephen," Marie said. "His name is Stephen." "Yes, I know, but—" Kate stopped. "Marie? You okay?" The normally mocha-skinned woman was very pale. Marie shrugged. "Guess I got the flu or something. Started coughing pretty bad." "Yeah," Kate agreed. "I can hear it in your voice. Sounds like you're breathing through cheesecloth." "You need to go take something," Jay said. Kate turned. Jay had left the beaker in the sink and was walking toward them. Marie sighed. "I took a bunch of stuff. Just going to take some time to kick in." "No," Kate pointed toward the door. "You are quarantined, young lady, until you get a nap." "But you guys will have to do everything yourselves." Marie's voice broke on the last word as she coughed into her arm. "Uh-huh," Jay said. "So what we need is a chemist with the flu corrupting our samples." "Give me a break," Marie smiled. "Like a little snot wouldn't do that stuff some good." Kate giggled. "As chief scientist of the Chemical Analysis Division of HAL, I'm telling you to get your ass upstairs and crash on a couch." "Okay." Marie wiped a runner of snot on her sleeve. "I'll go to the mother's room." "Good plan," Jay said. "Sit in that glider and sleep." He looked at Kate. "You think we can get Mave to check on her?" Kate grinned and pulled out her phone. "Of course." The waste container was clean. It moved as a tiny puddle. The constant assault of light and warmth had nearly destroyed it. Without nourishment, it could do little. Before it dropped into the trap, saliva flew inside and dissolved into the puddle. It absorbed the material, broke down the DNA and biological components into their constituent atoms, and rearranged them to be part of itself. The energy was enough to sustain it a little longer. But without more, it would cease to be. It slowly slid across the metal, searching for something else to absorb. But there was nothing to consume besides the molecular film left by cleaning solutions and chemicals. It ceased moving. It shrank in size as it pulled itself into a small, dense layer. It had to wait. Continuing to move would only weaken it further. Ratchet and Clank were blowing the shit out of everything. Mave maneuvered the cartoonish wombat-looking character from side to side as a huge creature flung missiles at it. Her thumb expertly pressed the 4 buttons on the controller in a sequence only she seemed to understand. The boss's health bar disappeared, and the creature fell into the virtual ground. Ratchet's world shook with the impact. Mave grinned as the screen faded into a cutscene. That's when her phone chimed. She pressed the start button, and the screen froze. Her phone buzzed again. She dropped the controller and grabbed the phone off the table. Mave rolled her eyes as she read the message. "Bad enough I'm stuck here. Now I have to be a nurse," she said aloud. The texts were from her mother, and they were pretty clear. Mave sighed. She stood from the couch and grabbed her glass of water. If she had to meet Marie at the stairs, at least she could get another drink while she was at it. A gust of wind shook the window pane. With the console blaring the game's audio, she hadn't noticed the weather change. Rain was falling, the wind had picked up, and she'd little doubt the temperature had dropped. She sighed. Mave opened Kate's office door and stopped. The hallway was darker than before. The fluorescence that had practically shined off the off-white walls seemed dim and wan. She stuck her head out through the doorframe and looked from side to side. There was no one in the hallway. A tremor of fear rose up her spine. Darkness. It was one of those childhood fears that still gnawed at her. She didn't believe in hell, but if one existed, she knew hers would be endless darkness punctuated by alien sounds and the occasional slithery touch on her skin. She shivered and stepped out of Kate's office. The hall was silent except for the sound of the air conditioner and the wind buffeting the building's exterior. Mave walked with careful steps toward the break room. She froze as the overhead lights came alive with full brightness. She squinted through the sudden illumination. Mave swallowed hard. She tried to call out, but her voice came out in a guttural whisper. She cleared her throat. "Hello?" There was no response. She cocked her ear to listen, but there was nothing to hear. Heart thumping in her chest, she continued walking. When she reached the corner, she peered around it. Empty. She loosed an inaudible sigh and turned into the break room. The fluorescence came on the moment she stepped across the threshold. With the exception of the garbage cans and recycling bins, it was impossible to tell a meal had been served an hour earlier. Mave wondered if Hal had cleaning fairies on staff. She opened the fridge and pulled out another bottle of water. She spun off the cap, filled her glass, and tossed the empty bottle into the bin. A creaking sound caught her attention. She remained as still as a statue and focused on the sound. A soft click followed a squeal. "Hello?" A wet, chest-rattling cough echoed from the hallway. She flinched and nearly dropped her glass. "Marie?" A hand appeared in the doorway. Then Marie. Mave sighed, and then she saw the look on the woman's face. Marie was more than just sick. She looked diseased. Mave put the glass on the counter and walked toward her. "You okay, Marie?" The chemist pulled up her arm and coughed into her sleeve. "Yes," she managed in between gasps. "I think I need to lie down." "You need some drugs." Marie shook her head. "Already took some. Think I just need some blankets and a place to crash." Marie tried to take a step and swayed on her feet. "Let me help you," Mave said. She walked to Marie and put an arm around her waist. "Where are we going?" "Down the hall," Marie croaked. Mave took the slight woman's weight and they shuffled in awkward steps. Marie's lungs rattled with each breath. The next more labored than the last. Mave felt trickles of sweat falling from Marie's forehead and into her hair. She wondered if Marie had somehow become infected by something in the lab. No, not infected. Contaminated. They reached the end of the hall and Mave turned them around the corner. A large room with an open door was at the end of the adjacent hallway. "Is that where we're going?" Mave chuffed. Marie didn't speak, but she felt the woman nod. "Just a few more steps, Marie." Marie said nothing in return. She seemed to be growing weaker with each step. Maeve's back started to ache, and she suddenly realized her arms were crying out from the effort. When they started, Marie was still holding up most of her weight. Now she was little more than a rag doll on sticks. As she led Marie through the open doorway, the lights came on. After the stringing brightness of the hallway, the wan glow of the overheads was soothing. A glider sat in the middle of the room. A small bed was up against the west wall. A crib, of all things, was pushed against the east wall. The walls of the other offices were barren and off-white except for whatever the denizens had hung themselves. The mother's room, however, was covered with bright landscapes. Starscapes covered the ceiling. Mave led Marie to the bed. When they were at its edge, the girl awkwardly turned her charge around until Marie could sit. Instead of sitting, Marie's ass plopped onto the mattress. Bed springs creaked. Mave let out a long sigh. Her arms and back ached and her heart raced in her chest. She turned her eyes to Marie's. The woman seemed unfocused and distant. Marie, you okay? Marie turned her head and stared at Mave with glazed eyes. A pained smile crossed her lips. Need to sleep. Mave nodded and slid off the bed's edge while she unhooked Marie's arm from around her neck. Marie tried to shift her weight on the mattress. The springs creaked again. Marie lay backward, her legs still hanging off the bed. Mave grabbed them and pushed them upward until they, too, were on the mattress. She lifted Marie's head and put a pillow beneath it. You cold? Mave asked. Marie, eyes closed, nodded. Mave bit her tongue and looked around the room. Besides the glider, crib, and bed, the room was practically vacant of other furniture. A small chair was next to the door. Mave saw what she was looking for. Blankets were piled up on top of the chair. Mave made a mental note to thank CEO Mike for giving a shit about his employees. She unfolded the thickest of them and covered Marie's feet, legs, and torso. Marie's weak hands pulled the blanket up to her neck. You need another one? Marie shook her head. Not yet. Can you put another one next to the bed? I'll grab it if I need it. Mave placed a dark blue comforter within Marie's reach. There. You want some water or something? Marie shook her head. No. She held out her hand. Thank you, Mave. The teenager clasped her hand around the clammy, hot skin. Marie's pulse seemed to throb in her veins. I think we need to get you a doctor. We'll sleep. If I'm not a little better soon, I'll get someone to take me. Mave nodded. I'll come back and check on you in 20 minutes or so, okay? Marie swallowed and her face screwed up in pain. Thank you, dear. Mave smiled. Sleep now. I'll be back soon. She let go of Marie's hand. The woman seemed to relax and immediately fall asleep. She waited a few moments, her eyes focused on the rise and fall of Marie's chest. When she was sure the woman could breathe and appeared to be resting, she rose from the bed and headed to the door. As she reached for the light switch, she heard something crackle. Mave turned and looked back at the bed. Marie had rolled over on her side. Bed springs. That must have been the bed springs. Marie's leg moved beneath the covers. Mave's face dropped into a sad smile. Sleep well, she said, and shut off the lights. She walked from the room, closing the door behind her. She didn't hear the crack and snap of bones as tendons and ligaments dissolved. She didn't hear Marie's unconscious gasps of pain. Mave headed back to Ratchet and Clank without a clue.